Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBingeIt podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim. And we're watching Star Trek Prodigy and talking about it here on the Talk Through Media network of podcasts. Hit it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 10, A Moral Star Part 2. This episode began streaming February 3rd, 2022.
So we're wrapping up the second helping of Season 1, and it goes on break again.
Yes, it goes on break again, and apparently we thought this was the end of Season 1, but this is the end of the middle of Season 1, and there are 10 more episodes coming sometime later this year. There's no release date yet.
I feel that should maybe go under Star Trek-iness because of like the old seasons of Star Trek where they'd have 26 episodes.
Oh yeah, this will give us 20. But there's such a big gap between them.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit like a fudge.
All marketing to drive subscribers, I'm sure.
I'll take it.
Not that I'm complaining.
Let's get down to the episode. Just like before, we'll do a walkthrough to discuss what we think about today's plot. We will read out some feedback that we got, and we'll play a clip from our kid correspondent, Mahi.
So into the episode. And there's no cold open.
Yeah, Star Trek needs a cold open.
I'm not going to disagree with that. But anyway, no cold open and straight into the episode. So we go straight into an outer view of the protostar and then into engineering where zombie Janeway is telling the diviner the protocore is not on board.
Duh.
And he says he needs it to get to the Federation. So, he's wanting to go to the source of the lies and hypocrisy?
Lies and hypocrisy. You gotta say it right. Don't worry, I don't intend to do that for this entire episode like I did last time. Although lies and hypocrisy can only be said that way. So if it comes up again.
Yeah, it's important. Gwyn then turns on her sword arm and jumps at the diviner, holding it at his throat, telling him, "You have your ship, leave them alone." And he reminds her that the heirloom was a gift from him, and the blue lines on his head glow, and the heirloom turns into handcuffs restraining Gwyn.
Ugh.
I like here in the background, Dreadnought is just sort of looming around with the big red eyes and the tentacles. He's just sort of hanging out there.
Yeah, there's like a tentacle kind of hovering over Gwen's head, but
Yeah.
he doesn't do anything.
The diviner then gives orders to reactivate the Watchers and return to Tars Lamora. "We have a star to catch," he says.
Back on Tars Lamora, Dal is trying to get the unwanted to the ship. His universal translator is helping two of the prisoners understand each other for the first time, and they're able to tell each other their names. And they're like totally cute in this moment as they appear to have feelings for each other and they like hold each other's hands. It's so adorable.
It also felt very Star Trek.
What do you mean?
If you allowed people to communicate, then they can find common ground.
Oh, yeah. It was really cute. On board the Rev 12, Rocktalk, Jankum, and the Fake Zero are cautiously walking past rows of the disabled Watchers. Those are those scorpion-like creatures that are really little robots.
Robotic bug monsters.
Yes, and they're trying to find the engine room, which at one point Rock says, "Murph found the engine room." I'm not sure Murph actually found it. But just as they find the room, those Watchers start to turn back on, and they run towards them. Our crew seals themselves in the engine room and shuts the door behind them. Jankum says he'll start working his magic on the engine and tells Rock to guard the door. But Rock reminds him that she can do more than just hold the door shut.
Hodor.
She also picks on him a little bit by saying, "I didn't know you could fix an engine by staring at it," because Jankum is clueless. He has no idea what to do.
I like that.
And he says, "Unless you've got a better idea." And then here we get some classic Star Trek technobabble from Rock Talk when she describes a possible solution using Murph and the protocore. I would have expected the protocore to have been the plan all along, but apparently not. So Jankum announces, "New plan." Jankum holds the door, and then Rock gets to work. It's super cute.
Yes, definitely. Back in the mines, and Zero has found the Cation who was in hiding.
Hashtag save the Cation.
And we hear some meowing from the Cation as well.
Oh, I know, and it's even in the closed captions. Meow.
However, another Watcher has awoken and shoots Zero, and Zero loses an arm. Dal uses a phaser on the Watcher and shoots it, after missing the first couple of times, I noticed.
Yeah, he shoots all over the place, but he gets it eventually. Maybe some phaser instruction would be a good idea instead of just, "Here's a gun, start shooting." Although it's cool in this scene, he's swooping around with his little gravity belt, and he's like a superhero.
Yeah, he seems to have got that thruster pack pretty much down.
Yeah.
Dal tells Zero they'll never get everyone to the ship. They need a faster way to communicate. Then he sees the restraint on the Cation's leg and says, "The manacles." Meanwhile, on the Rev 12, things are getting pretty intense in the engine room. The Watchers are breaking through the door and Jankum is fighting them off while Rock works frantically. One of them breaks through and takes a shot at Rock. Jankum jumps on it and apparently beats it into spare parts.
Well, it's a kid show, so I guess they didn't want to show him smashing it to bits, but I think they could have done that. I mean, they're scary scorpion creatures.
Yeah, that shoot at people. I don't think they're very good guys.
No. But this was a really good scene for Jankum, as it showed how he can use his arm in other ways rather than just as an engineer. It was actually pretty effective in like grabbing those things as they were moving through the air towards Rock Talk and smashing them. I don't know. He's pretty effective. He could do the security job then instead of Rock Talk.
Yeah, he also used it to help hold the door down as well at one point.
Yeah, that's right.
While Murph is chirping happily in the background, Rock Talk pulls a lever and the power comes back online, along with the atmospheric shield and gravity.
There's so many happy sounds coming from Murph in this episode. Normally we just get the sort of cooing.
Yeah.
But there's just all kinds of cute noises that he's making. You know, he's so happy to be with Rock Talk.
He's having a great time there. He's really enjoying this. Well, remember at one point, he gets like a lightning discharge onto his body. And he's like, ooh, no effect.
They also use the theme here. They use it multiple times in this episode, and that's the Prodigy theme, not the other Star Trek theme that we talk about so frequently, but they use it here as well.
Dal in the mines is trying to hotwire a communicator and the manacle. The Cation, who's wearing the most adorable spacesuit, by the way, points at the sky, and we see the protostar has returned. And Zero says, they're back.
In case listeners can't tell, James and I are obsessed with cats.
Yes.
The Cation is wearing the cutest little adorable spacesuit and is extremely cute in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel the need to point out that our two cats are currently in their heated beds because it's very cold.
Yeah, from their perspective, it's freezing outside, even though it isn't.
Also adorable. They don't have spacesuits, but they do have electric beds.
One of them does talk as much as Murph.
That's true. Makes as much noise. Back in the engine room of the Rev 12, Dreadnought beams down and demands that they hand over the protocore. Rock Talk and Jankum try and stop him, but he is much too strong, even for Rock Talk.
Yeah.
He actually throws Rock Talk across the room.
That was surprising. He's clearly very powerful. I guess if you're going to build an evil sidekick robot, you probably need to make him stronger than the strongest prisoners that you're holding.
Yeah.
Because he had no problem with Rock Talk.
But he even is able to sort of hold Rock Talk out of reach with all of his long arms. And so she became ineffective as soon as he was able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, just as he has the two of them cornered and he's going in for the kill, the doors are forced open and in come the miners, led by the Cation. And the Cation speaks. And she tells Dreadnought, we now have a voice. Good for us, bad for you. And we see a lot of very annoyed looking miners.
Well, apart from the awesome cat, there was also a Morn, whatever that species is, in the background.
Yes, a Lurian.
Do you think it could actually be the Morn? I mean, Morn seems like the kind of guy who could get into trouble like that.
Well, Morn always likes to go with the crowd. So, you know, he might have been lumbering along with the crowd, but, you know, he's pretty docile. I think he would be looking for somewhere to sit.
Yeah. Is there a bar around here?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the bar? So the miners rush Dreadnought and they manage to pin him down just because of their number.
Yeah.
And he tells them the mission will not be stopped. Our diviner will prevail. And a very serious looking Cation approaches him. And we see this great shot of her deploying her claws like she's freaking Wolverine.
I thought that too. That was very Wolverine-esque.
Yeah, and then you hear a hiss and then like a slash, and they actually even show like slash marks across the screen.
Yeah.
And Dreadnought's severed head lands on the floor and the red eyes go to black.
Oh, that was great.
That was a very moving moment after the entire season of me waiting for them to save the Cation.
Yeah.
That was great.
And it kind of fulfilled the idea of maybe the Cation will be the one that saves them.
Yeah.
That was a great moment.
Then you hear a transport sound and we see a non-glowing Murph. Zero determines that the diviner must have beamed the protocore out of Murph.
So I guess the atmospheric shield isn't strong enough to deflect or stop transport activity?
I guess not. I guess it's not that kind of shield.
Yeah.
Hand wave, hand wave. Back on the protostar, the computer informs the diviner that the proto-warp will be online in 10 minutes, which is convenient because we need some time.
Yep.
Meanwhile, back on the Rev 12, they power up for launch, and lots of the mining crew run to what looked like control consoles. At first, I thought they were escape pods, but no, they all run to these little consoles.
So I guess they needed a lot of people on the ship to actually fly it?
I don't know. They don't explain it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very big ship, but also, why would these miners know that? Is this not a ship from the future, as we learn later, how would they even know what to do?
That's a very good point. I think that might fall under another bit of hand-wavy. But at least some of them, if they were kidnapped and brought there, may have experience of flying a ship or know what to do. And it's probably a subset of the miners that were actually doing this. But it does beg the question of maybe Dreadnought could actually control all the systems on the ship, so you didn't need a lot of crew. And with him gone, you actually needed a crew.
I wonder if something got cut explaining that. It was very dramatic when they all ran into those little cubby holes.
Yep.
We get no explanation. I would like an explanation. I always like to have an explanation, even if it's too much technobabble for me to understand. I still like to know why we do things. Well, on the bridge of the Rev 12, Dal says, "We're coming, Gwen," and the ship takes off, immediately jumping to warp. And there's a little use of the theme song again.
Absolutely. They love using that in this episode. On the Protostar, Gwyn is trying to disable the shields. The Diviner walks onto the bridge and asks zombie Janeway why she didn't warn him. She replies, "I only answer to Starfleet." And she turns back into regular Janeway.
Woohoo!
Gwyn tells him she upgraded her programming so she couldn't be overridden.
And the big news here, she's now corporeal.
Yes.
She can hug Rock Talk.
Oh, Rock Talk's going to be very happy about that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, and was the coffee cup scene a hint at the upgraded Janeway? Because remember they all put their coffee cups together and, like, do a toast?
Yeah. Maybe that was a test.
Yes.
Yep. Didn't think about that at the time. Good catch.
The Diviner attempts to fight Janeway, but she quickly gets the upper hand and eventually breaks one of the tubes in his suit, and blue liquid spills out.
I think it's pretty difficult to beat someone who can just disappear.
Oh, yes.
And reappear somewhere else. Plus, how can you harm a hologram? They just come back.
That's very true. This seems to weaken the Diviner, and he struggles, falling down to one knee. He implores Gwyn not to lower the shields. He tells her, "We can still save our people." Gwyn asks him, "You said our homeworld was destroyed. We were the last." And he tells her that Solum is here, but it won't be for long. And we get the huge reveal. He was sent back in time to save it.
That was the first time I yelled at the television. I was like, time travel!
I honestly didn't think he was the time traveler.
Oh, who did you think was the time traveler?
The ship.
Oh, well, still could be.
He pleads to Gwendala.
Gwendala.
"There is no barrier we cannot overcome. You will doom our people."
Oh my God, the emotional blackmail in this scene. And he's so melodramatic.
Yeah.
He's like gasping on the floor. Oh, help me. But what's cool is Gwen is like, "Okay, dude," but she continues. She's trying to get the shields down. She looks back at him and she's like, yeah, okay. And she keeps working at it. But starting to get to her. The story's starting to get to her.
Yes. She pauses the hologram Janeway and asks him, "Tell me the truth, all of it." And the Diviner replies, "Even better, I can show you."
When she pauses the Janeway hologram, it's kind of freaky because Janeway hologram's face is right at the front of the scene and is basically filling the entire screen. And then you see Gwen turn and walk back towards the Diviner, and Janeway's face is just frozen. And it was like, oh, Gwen, what are you doing?
Oh, it was great storytelling. It was putting in your mind, wait a minute, has she just turned back?
Yeah, they definitely are doing a little trick there to get you to think maybe she's starting to sway. But ultimately, she really just wants answers, and she wants to know what's going on. And Janeway was kind of right there trying to push her to keep working on the shields and ignore him. It's almost mean that she's able to freeze her.
Yeah.
And so she freezes her, and then she's got this haunting face sort of behind her, but she goes back and starts talking to the Diviner. Outside of the Protostar, we see that the Rev 12 has caught up with them. On the bridge, Dal is asking, "Why aren't we on that ship already?" And Zero explains it's because the shields are still up. Because that was part of the plan, was Gwen was supposed to get the shields down.
I like the effect here because of that red-orange lighting on the Rev 12. It made Dal's uniform look gold.
Yeah.
Like an original series uniform.
Oh, funny.
Sort of like a Kirk-esque kind of nod.
He's a little Kirk-like sometimes, and I think we even commented on that later, right?
Yes.
Zero and Rock tell Dal that if they shoot at the shield emitters, it could lower the shields, so they could beam across without really damaging the ship too much.
Yeah.
Dal reluctantly agrees and says, "Target the Protostar," and they begin firing. Well, on the Protostar holodeck, the Diviner has uploaded a simulation of Solum, and he tells Gwen, "This is how it looks today. The Vaunakat are flourishing, confident in our supremacy, believing it is just us in the universe."
And there's the problem right there.
What a speech. confident in our supremacy.
People who would say that tend to be pretty awful.
That supremacy comment is one thing, but the other thing about believing it's just us in the universe, I think that becomes interesting later here as we learn a bit more. The diviner tells the computer to advance 50 years after the first contact, and the city is in ruins. And Gwen asks, Starfleet did this? The diviner tells her, Starfleet lit the fire and left us to burn. After their arrival, apparently, civil war splintered their people between those who sided with the Federation and those who would die to preserve their way of life.
Ugh. I got such a vibe for Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, the original series episode. Could the Diviner's utopia have been based on half the population being treated as an underclass? I'm going to guess here and say the people who wanted the Federation weren't the ones benefiting from, quote, preserving their way of life.
Well, isn't that always the case? It's like people who want to go back to the 50s because they think the 50s was so great. It wasn't great for everybody.
Yes, true.
So the diviner tells Gwen, history can be rewritten. We can stop first contact by arming a weapon already aboard the protostar. We can wipe out all of Starfleet from existence. A very concerned Gwen asks, what did you put on this ship?
Yeah.
This just seems like such an extreme solution to this problem.
I think it fits with the diviner, though.
Yeah.
If he believes, or they believe, that they are superior, then anything that removes these inferior races is completely justified because they are better than them.
Yeah. But this plan is so crazy. Like somehow he's going to infect some Starfleet ships, which are going to wipe out the Federation somehow. And then it's going to stop first contact because one of the things he said is they were happy when they thought they were the only ones in the universe, but they're not. The Federation's not the only ones in the universe. So are you going to wipe everybody else out too? Because somebody else is going to come knocking.
The Klingons, the Romulans.
Yeah. And which quadrant are we in? Are we in the Gamma Quadrant? Because there's lots of bad things in the Gamma Quadrant that are going to come knocking. He
didn't say if Solon was in the Alpha Quadrant or
not.
No,
they don't. They don't say.
So which side of the war do you think the diviner was on?
Lies and hypocrisy. Yeah, he was not on the side of the Federation.
On the Rev 12, Jankum says they can only beam one person over at a time. Dal runs to the transport pad and Rock asks, what's your plan? He replies, I'll tell you when I got one.
Just as he's beaming away.
Yeah. Now that's a Dal plan. At least you can't call it half-baked because he doesn't have one.
But it felt like such a Captain Kirk moment.
Yes.
Beam me there. Let's go.
And that's where I thought it tied back to the gold uniform.
Yeah, I gotcha.
On the holodeck, Gwyn and the diviner are walking through the ruins of Solum. He tells Gwyn that when their ship comes into contact with a Starfleet vessel, it will release a signal that will corrupt their systems, turning ship against ship until the entire alliance is reduced to nothing.
This plan is crazy.
I also thought this had kind of a nod to Discovery Season 2 with Control, where it could control ships and do its own fighting.
But if two ships come in contact with each other and they each destroy each other, the virus hasn't moved on.
It might have been more complex than that.
Yeah, the plan was a little hazy to me. I need to see some charts, a timeline.
Yes.
Create some JIRA stories.
He tells her that once Starfleet is destroyed, they can return to Solum, and one day she will understand.
I thought he wanted to destroy the Federation. Now he's just saying once Starfleet is destroyed.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't know the difference.
Mixing terms.
Yeah.
A horrified Gwyn says, if we go to Starfleet, we'll
destroy them.
This doesn't work out well for him, because Gwyn says, we can't go. We can never go.
Yeah, she hasn't been convinced.
And she tells him, you can't trade one tragedy for another. You need to talk to them.
Oh, I was so happy to hear her say that.
Yes. None of this has worked out the way he intended.
No.
The computer announces proto-warp is now ready, and the diviner says, time for talk is over, and opens an archway in the holodeck, revealing Dal armed with two phasers. As we just saw him shoot a few minutes ago, I don't think the diviner's in too much danger.
But he was flying through the air. He's got his feet planted on the ground. Just shoot. Why are you waiting? What are you waiting for?
Yeah.
But it's too late because the diviner shoots the programmable matter stuff, like the heirloom sword, out of his hands, trapping Dal in a restraint, and the phasers go flying. And Dal, when he hits the ground, laments, I was really hoping that would go a different way.
That's exactly the kind of thing James T. would say.
Gwen tries to stop the diviner but gets thrown to the ground. He stands over them and says to Gwen, "You would help the inferior before your own people?"
Yep, space Nazis.
The diviner picks up Dal and says, he alone is no match for the Vaunakat. But then Zero appears behind him, saying, "Who said he was alone? I will not let you hurt my friends." And Zero takes off the protective shell, exposing the diviner to their true form.
Yeah.
And you see this amazing effect of Zero appearing as a glowing and swirling energy ball. And it's like scorched earth.
Oh, completely, yeah.
It's quite an effect.
I feel Zero at this point should have said, "Who's superior now?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dal tells Gwen, don't look at Zero, but she catches a glimpse in the reflection of Dal's communicator badge, and her pupils go all big and she falls backwards.
This is why they should make the badges non-reflective. Plus, if these two had watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, they would have known to close their eyes.
Oh, yeah. That was exactly what I was thinking the first time through. Close your eyes.
Yeah.
Don't take the risk. Well, Dal shouts at Zero to turn off the juice or whatever he says.
Yeah.
And Zero returns to his suit, leaving the diviner staring at the sky, and then he falls to his knees. But Gwen is also lying on the ground saying, "We can't go," over and over.
Ugh.
Oh, that was harsh.
Yes.
And Dal is just sobbing at this point.
The non-zombie Janeway is now recording a training log, and we see the Rev 12 with its new liberated crew of the former Unwanted,
Yeah.
including the Cation, who is holding a Starfleet badge.
Come on, the Cation's the captain. Captain Cation.
The diviner is also now abandoned on the asteroid. His reign of terror foreseeably over. Until season 2, I'm going to assume.
Yeah, he's crawling around on the ground,
Like drawing symbols or something.
drawing pictures.
Gwyn is in sickbay and Zero is attending to her. She's recovering, but has lost all the memory of these events.
And during this scene, they were using a really slow version of
Yeah.
the theme song. Very dramatic.
And Janeway says they've learned they'll always be stronger together, just as Gwyn returns to the bridge, aided by Dal.
Aw.
Well, now on the bridge with Hologram Janeway, Zero asks, "Where to?" And Dal replies, "It's time to return their ship, set a course for Starfleet." Gwyn seems briefly concerned by this, but then she says, "Everything's fine."
Yeah, she sort of looks up and does a Nemo.
Yeah.
That's a nice name. And then goes back to what she was doing.
Yes.
You just thought, oh, for a second, maybe she's going to remember.
Yeah.
But no.
You thought it was going to trigger something.
Yeah.
Continuing the log, Janeway says, "Each of them has exceptional qualities that they've only just begun to discover. Each of them a prodigy in the making."
Aw.
And thus we get the name for the show.
Yeah, I see what they did there.
Yeah, nice touch.
Yeah.
And the protostar jumps to warp as the theme music swells and the screen goes black.
And Mahi and family paused and thought the episode was over here.
Oh no.
But it's not. As much as you maybe loved that speech and thought that was the ending because it was very cool, especially the little tie-in of the Prodigy line.
Yes.
We are not done because we get a blinking blue dot and it reveals a star map and a Trill in a Starfleet uniform. I'm already excited. And she says, "I'm detecting a proto-warp signature. That makes 3 times now, Admiral." And what Admiral is she talking to? Admiral Janeway. This is another time when I shouted at the screen.
Yes, that was awesome.
It was, "Oh, there's time travel," I shouted. There's, "Oh, it's the Cation, and she's a Wolverine." And then it was, "It's Admiral Janeway."
Yeah.
Well, Admiral Janeway says, "It's time to rescue our missing ship and get some answers." And then orders, "Take us to the last protostar signature, maximum warp." And then quietly she says, "I'm coming, Chakotay." It was so dramatic and so cool.
Yes.
And then we cut to a flyby of the NCC 80816 USS Dauntless. And it jumps to warp.
Awesome.
And then it really does end.
That was great.
That was quite an ending.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
the longest What Things Stood Out section that we have had yet in all 10 episodes. But let's get started on the things that stood out for us.
Oh yeah, they crammed so much into this episode.
Well, I've been hashtagging Save the Cation since the beginning. I was so happy we saved the Cation. I don't even know what to say. That was my... It was my favorite thing and most important thing that happened. And I'm really hoping that the cat's now the captain of this ship from the future. flying around.
Well, most importantly, I think Cations are freaking awesome from seeing this.
Oh man, the Wolverine move, that was something. Although, why did she just bring it out then? Seems like maybe she could have used it to not get captured, but that's okay. I'll take it.
So what is her name?
I guess she's just credited so far as Cation Child, but hopefully we'll get a name eventually. Now that they can speak to each other, they can tell each other their names.
Yeah. Another thing is Dal needs to spend some time with phaser practice, in my opinion.
Yeah, they need to do some of that practice shooting in the holodeck like Worf and Guinan. A little target practice.
Maybe a little bit of practice with a Batlath, too.
Any weapon training could be helpful. One of the things that really stood out for me was when those little minor dudes started to speak to each other and they were just so thrilled to understand each other and they could profess their love for each other. Oh my gosh, it was adorable. I really liked that scene.
Made me think of the Minions as well, actually.
Yeah, they do have a little minion look. Yeah.
And another thing is, the Dauntless, I'm afraid to say, is just an ugly looking ship.
Oh, I didn't think it was an ugly ship, but okay.
And I'm wondering if maybe this is a callback to the Dauntless World War II dive bomber, which aesthetically was not a very pleasing aircraft to look at, but was extraordinarily effective. So maybe they're going with that. The Dauntless is a effective Starfleet ship, but not very good looking.
Well, okay. First of all, who cares? It's Admiral Janeway. And secondly, let's not forget where the Dauntless comes from. The Dauntless class was the ship from the Voyager episode Hope and Fear that we talked about way back in, I don't know, episode 1 or 2.
Right.
And Species 8472 took one of their own ships, made it look like a Starfleet ship, and called it the Dauntless. So now we have a connection. I feel vindicated because I said from the beginning, I felt like there was some connection to that episode. And now we have another connection right here at the end. And the inside of that ship looks a lot like, at least in parts, what the inside of that fake ship looked like in the Voyager episode as well.
Yeah.
So there's a connection. We don't know the full connection
to
yet.
Voyager as well.
An absolute Voyager connection. And I still think the Vaunakot is going to be Species 8472.
I think as well with the storyline, it reminds me of the Kelvin universe Star Trek with the Romulan who traveled back in time.
Well, that's another thing we talked about earlier in the season, that the Rev 12 looked a lot like that ship. Interesting.
Another little thing that I liked was when the Diviner had the holoprogram and it sort of like merged into the console.
Well, I guess that makes sense that they're not going to have some kind of USB protocol that matches from the future and across all these different species and ships. So, it's got to just absorb it. Yeah, that was cool.
I kind of like that.
This supremacist nature of the Vaunakot and the civil war that destroyed them. I mean, I still say this whole plan is ridiculous, that they're going to destroy Starfleet and somehow that's going to preserve their civilization because anybody else could stop by. The Jem'Hadar could stop by and that would be the end of that.
Or some very annoyed Klingons.
It's just such a weird plan.
Yeah.
Their plan could have been to stop First Contact, met the ship that was coming in for First Contact and says, we talked about it and we don't want First Contact, please go away.
Or destroy the ship.
Well, another one might come then. But at least if they said, we know you're out there, please stay away, Starfleet would have listened to that.
Yeah, you could have fitted that under the Prime Directive. Don't come and see us, we're not ready.
It reminded me a little bit of something that happens in Discovery with Captain Lorca. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't watched Discovery, because I think people should watch Discovery. But there is a moment where he does something drastic and Michael says to him, gee, you could have just told us that's what you were trying to do and we would have helped you.
Right.
And I thought this was something similar.
Right.
It's like you're trying to destroy, he says, the entire Federation when you probably could just have one conversation. You could solve the whole problem. But because of this supremacy nonsense, you're completely out of whack with your idea.
I'm wondering if there was more to it there. Going with the supremacy angle, if he was also bringing technology back to give to the Vaunakot so that they could end up as the dominant species.
Well, then they should have just done that.
Yeah.
This plan's crazy. He's maybe a little touched.
Yes, he could be.
Something else about the Diviner being from the future.
Yeah.
We talked about that possibility before of something coming from the future. Like you said, you thought it was the ship.
Yeah.
In the Kobayashi episode, when they do that flashback to 17 years ago, and really when the progeny was created, the Diviner and Dreadnought are having a conversation about the Order, which is probably something to do with this group that is sending back Vaunakat to try to stop first contact from happening.
Yeah.
But they said many have failed before to find the protostar. So that's still a mystery that we haven't answered.
So there could be a whole group of surviving Vaunakat who are just sending people back time and again to try and find the ship and try and destroy Starfleet.
It could be. I hope that's not... I hope they don't all come back with that crazy plan. But I think that's what's implied, which is a little nuts.
Yeah, they could all be crazy.
It was cool to see a trill on Admiral Janeway's ship.
Yes.
That was exciting.
Always happy to see the Trill, even if I have questions about their society and why it's in the Federation.
I understand your issues with the Trill. I just think it's such an interesting species that the stories and the story possibilities are absolutely endless.
I don't think the Trill themselves are uninteresting. I think it's how they view the unjoined Trill is the problem.
They have a supremacy problem as well, the symbionts.
Yes.
But it was still cool to see that. And Jamila Jamil as the voice there was cool. I mean, just look, Admiral Janeway alone stood out as a super exciting thing to happen at the end of this episode and unexpected.
Yeah, I loved seeing Admiral Janeway. That was great to put her in at the end. And then trying to rescue Chakotay.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I think the great irony of this entire story is that if the diviner had just not done anything, Gwen and team were planning to take the ship back to Starfleet or would have ended up taking that ship back to Starfleet at some point, and his plan would have happened.
Right.
His interfering is probably the thing that's going to stop it from happening.
Yeah. If you just let things play out.
I like that twist.
Nice.
Well, I think we talked about everything in the What Stood Out section. So many things.
Yes. Pretty much the whole episode, really.
Let's move on to character development. There was that cool little scene where Jankum tells Rock to hold the door, and then he looks at the engine, he's like, I can't fix this.
Yeah.
And realizes that Rock is the one who should fix it and he'll hold the door. That was cool because you saw there's no ego in Jankum. He's just like, okay, now Jankum holds the door. You go fix the thing. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I did like that. He's not going to stand in the way of somebody with a better idea.
Yeah, that was great.
I really like that about the character of Jankum that they're trying to build.
Yep.
So, the diviner.
Yeah.
Do you think he was playing to Gwyn's emotions and that he was faking the weakness? That he's figured out that Gwyn has a good heart and he was playing to that?
I definitely didn't think that the first time through when I was watching it by myself, but then later when you and I watched it together and you pointed that out, that was a possibility, it was like, yeah, okay, maybe. Because by the next scene when they go on the holodeck, he's back to being fine.
Exactly. I took it as he saw that he couldn't easily beat Janeway, so went for a different approach.
That makes sense. He's relatively smart, except for this crazy plan.
Well, I wonder if part of the plan as well comes down to simply the case of they think they are superior, therefore their plan is brilliant.
Oh, well, I have run into those people.
Yeah, the Khan sort of effect.
My plan couldn't possibly be bad. I'm a genius.
Exactly.
Gwen is still very conflicted about her father. I think she still wants to believe the best in him.
Oh, definitely.
But she ends up seeing it's even worse than she thought.
In some ways, that was a nice touch, and it feels bad for Gwen because it's sort of like, I feel she opened the door.
Yeah.
And then what does he do? I'm not just bad, I'm like genocidally bad.
I wonder if she had a conflict when she heard the story about there being two sides in Solum in this civil war, where half of them, I don't know if it was half, but some of them wanted to go with the Federation or be a part of that.
Right.
And some of them didn't. And that was what caused the conflict. I wonder if that was making her think, hey, maybe there are some other people like me out there that I could connect with.
Yeah.
They're not all like her father.
Well, I think that's a deliberate part of maybe the story, that this was the problem with Solum, that half the planet was of the diviner's ilk and the rest were of Gwyn's view.
Yeah.
That was what really caused the conflict.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm the fan of him, I'm bringing up Dal as showing that he has the perfect Starfleet crazy captain approach to things. I'll figure out a plan as I go along. It's just perfect.
Some of the things he did early on in the season, those, like he said, the half-baked plans, they didn't always have the right motivations.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And here, or at least we're relating him more to a Starfleet captain because he's actually risking himself to save someone else.
Yeah.
He's diving in to do the right thing instead of diving in to do the wrong thing or run away from the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's why all of a sudden we can relate to him more and he feels more Starfleet.
Yeah, he's doing it selflessly rather than having his own agenda when he's doing it.
If this is the Dal we have now, this version, that's great. If we think about where we started with this character,
Yeah.
I know I said somewhere along the way he was my least favorite character,
Right.
but he's moving up the ranks. I don't know how because I still like all the other characters.
Yeah.
But suddenly I like him. I thought he was really great in this episode. And
Yeah.
I felt it when he was sobbing when Gwen was hurt. It was very moving, which means I give a crap about him. And so that made me happy.
Oh, he's definitely shown the most growth.
Agreed.
And also, he did prove one of the oldest lessons in Westerns, which is when you have to shoot, shoot. Don't talk.
100%. The last thing in character development is about Zero.
Yeah.
This normally non-emotional character, the kind of Vulcan-like or the Data-like character, as we've talked about before, completely lost their cool when coming face to face with a diviner.
Yes.
Someone who tortured them and forced them to be a weapon.
Yeah.
Zero just lost it. And like I said, it was scorched earth, the reaction here.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting moment in character development. Because I would say that Zero had not changed much as we were watching along these episodes. And I wondered if we would have any development there. And then this happens. And it was so extreme.
Right.
It just tells you that there's something behind there. It's not necessarily that the character has developed, but we know there's a lot there yet to explore.
When you say we relate to him to Data and sort of Vulcans,
Yeah.
it reminded me of the episode where Data shot the Collector at the end.
Oh, right, when they beam him away.
Yes, and they disable the phaser because Data's come to the logical, rational, moral conclusion that killing the Collector will stop others from being hurt.
Yeah, the right thing to do. Yeah, I can see the connection there. And then it had some collateral damage as well.
Yeah.
Which Zero clearly felt guilty about.
And he owned it as well. Janeway said that he never left her side in sickbay.
Yes. Okay, let's move from character development to any latest info about the ship.
Well, it has some kind of terrible virus on board. And we know from watching Deep Space Nine that in the past, certainly, Starfleet has no antivirus software or firewalls. Their password is always 1234 or 4321. And they have open Ethernet ports that you can just plug your subspace shunts into.
It's very true.
Oh, and the Ferengi can easily hack the systems, including the replicators, on the premier Starfleet warship, the Defiant, as happened in an episode.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see here what happens.
Yeah.
We had a whole Discovery season about an evil AI infiltrating Starfleet.
Yep.
I hope we're not going to do the same thing here because, been done, I guess.
Well, I have a theory.
Yeah.
Maybe they meet up with Janeway and it affects her ship's computers, and Janeway and crew manage to disable the ship or purge the computers, but it's a last-ditch sort of attempt, and they can't risk the ship coming into contact with other Starfleet vessels. So the Protostar has to jump back into the Gamma Quadrant and stay away from Starfleet until Janeway can figure out how to fix it.
And they take Janeway with, and she becomes the captain of the Protostar.
That would be pretty awesome, wouldn't it?
That was the first thing that I thought. I was like, they've tricked us. It's not going to be hologram Janeway. It's going to be actual Admiral Janeway. She's going to have to scuttle her ship because of this virus, whatever it is,
right.
And she's going to end up on the Protostar. That definitely crossed my mind.
And it could keep sort of the momentum going of they can't be part of Starfleet, but they can learn to be part of Starfleet until they fix the ship.
That's a good point. I think that's a pretty good theory. There's still this mystery here, which we should have maybe mentioned in the standout section, which is the Chakotay mystery. We still don't have the answer there, and Janeway is looking for him. So we're not sure what the diviner did to him, although I was worried that they turned him into one of the diviners.
Oh, or the Dreadnought.
That mystery remains.
Hopefully they've just abandoned him on a planet somewhere.
Yeah. Maybe he was one of the miners in the suits that we couldn't see their face.
Oh, they erased his memory.
Although, where's the rest of his crew? Yeah, hopefully they just abandoned them somewhere.
Right.
And they're safe, yeah. Okay, let's move on to how this episode worked as a kid show and hear from our kid correspondent, Mahi.
This episode was very twisted. I liked some parts but did not like some others. I loved that Zero's plan to drive the diviner crazy worked, and the crew and the miners were safe for that day. But Gwen accidentally saw Zero's reflection and now doesn't remember Diviner's evil plot.
Do you think we will see the diviner again?
I don't think we will see the diviner again. After seeing Zero in his real form, the diviner has now become crazy and lost his mind.
What will Hologram Janeway think of Admiral Janeway?
I think Hologram Janeway will be happy to report back to Admiral Janeway that she was able to use all of her programming to help the Protostar crew just like Admiral Janeway would have. I also think Hologram Janeway will ask the Admiral to teach her more.
Will Gwen remember the secret about the ship?
I don't think Gwen will remember the secret about the ship on her own. But Hologram Janeway was on the ship too. She may help Gwen remember it, or the crew may figure it out too.
What do you think about the cat? Do you like it?
I love the cat. The cat is very brave. It helped fight the Dreadnought and the Watchers to save the miners and the crew. I think the cat is the captain of the miner ship and their leader.
Do you think that the episode had a happy ending?
I think it was an incomplete and complicated ending. It was a happy ending as the crew is still alive and the miners are all free. But complicated because they don't know the secret about the ship and Gwen doesn't remember it yet.
So, what do you think about the show so far?
The show has been very entertaining so far. Some of the episodes were better than the others. I have learned many lessons watching it. I'm so glad the Ferengi has not come back yet. The crew now works very well together. Captain Hologram Janeway is great as usual. She had me fooled as well as the diviner by acting all evil for a little bit. I hope the show is back soon. I can't wait to see how they will save the ship and Starfleet.
Thank you for your analysis, Mahi.
Yes.
Well, you and Mahi seem to have the same take on the cat.
Oh, yeah, the cat's totally the captain. She knows. I'm not convinced that we've seen the last of the diviner or his kind.
No.
But I like her optimism.
Yeah, I think Dreadnought is a little bit too easy to replicate, so he'll be back. And I kind of like him anyway. So I think the show is a success as far as the target audience goes, regardless of their age.
Yeah, seems to be working for her, and it's working for us.
Yep.
Well, we got one piece of audio feedback from Jeff X-Force 11.
Hello, Star Trek fans. This is Jeff X-Force 11 leaving my feedback about the season finale of Prodigy. Man, what an episode. We got battles, we've got the Cation being rescued, and all of the people working together to start a new life and return themselves back to their cultures. And we have the showdown between our big bad and the rest of our crew of the Protostar. And I really enjoyed it. I am so glad that even though we got some resolution, we've got this cliffhanger of what's going to happen when the Protostar meets up with Starfleet now that the memory of those events are not in the memory. But I'm still questioning, was that not recorded on the holodeck? I just don't know. But we have the real Admiral Janeway going after the Protostar on the Dauntless. And so it just is a good setup for the next season, and I cannot wait. I am loving this series. Thanks for y'all for covering it and everybody leaving feedback. X-Force is out.
Hard to disagree with pretty much everything you said there.
He makes a good point about the program on the holodeck. I wonder if Gwen will try wandering in there to see if it triggers anything or if she remembers anything, and then maybe it will come back because of that. Or, maybe what the diviner said is actually recorded somewhere if somebody, makes an effort to go and look. That's a very interesting idea I hadn't thought of.
Computer, why did I keep on saying we can't go there?
Yeah, the computer would have been listening.
Interesting point. That could be a whole thread for the next season.
Yeah.
And moving on to the feedback we receive via email or the Facebook group or wherever else it comes from. And the first feedback comes from Brian M. from Talk Through Media. And he says, hashtag, they saved the cat.
Thank you, Brian.
What more needs to be said? Okay, I'll say more. There's a bit of a fusing of Starfleet and the Federation in the show, using them interchangeably when they aren't interchangeable.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia, Starfleet is a uniformed space force maintained by the United Federation of Planets, the Federation, as a principal means for conducting deep space exploration, research, defense, peacekeeping, and diplomacy. I think they could do a better job in keeping those straight, but it's a minor quibble. This is interesting that we get time travelers, a first contact that has gone awry, which we've seen in an earlier episode this season, an actual Admiral Janeway and her new ship, and maybe Chakotay. And as she's captaining the USS Dauntless, NCC 80816, which is a Voyager reference to the fake Dauntless, NX-01A,
Yes.
it seems the protostar may be a Trojan horse of sorts, but I wonder if that's the story of the second part of the season. Also, we now get, through Janeway's exposition, why the show is called Star Trek Prodigy and not Star Trek Progeny. That would have been a good name, actually.
Star Trek, my progeny.
Anyway, it was a good ending to a pseudo season. I am looking forward to the second half.
I don't know, Brian. I question your source here. You're getting information about Starfleet and the Federation from Wikipedia.
Yeah, I'm with you,
But
Ken.
no, I do agree, though. I think that they almost interchangeably use Starfleet and the Federation, and it does get confusing. Even in that scene where he's talking about he's going to go to Starfleet and destroy the Federation, and then later it's Starfleet again. So, yeah. Although maybe he doesn't know. He easily could be confused.
Oh.
It seems like when Janeway gave the speech about it, she knew.
Oh.
She wasn't confused. But this guy, maybe he doesn't know.
You know, facts are for lesser species. I mean, he is superior, so he doesn't really need them.
That's true.
I think that would be the diviner's excuse.
That's a good point.
Next up, we have some feedback from Brian S. that came from the Facebook group.
That's Brian from Colorado.
Brian writes, I liked A Moral Star Part 2 and rate it 9 out of 10 real Admiral Janeways. The final scene alone made this whole season worth watching. I also chafed at the Federation Starfleet misstatements throughout, but it's a nitpick. Overall, the characters have developed well and are compelling to follow. Dal especially has come a long way, as has Gwen. I do hope we're past the Star Wars side of the story, now that the Diviner is marooned and General Grievous is supposedly dead. I'm looking forward to seeing where this prestigious crew goes next.
Well, thanks for that feedback, Brian. I would caution anyone who thinks General Grievous is dead. We've seen multiple General Grievouses or Dreadnoks.
He's flown off the back of the ship twice.
I think we're going to see him again.
I hope so.
Yeah, we all sort of picked up on that issue with Federation and Starfleet being used interchangeably. And way at the beginning of ReBinge Deep Space Nine, somebody emailed and said that I had done the same thing. Maybe I have. I don't know. So it does feel like a nitpick, but they do need to get that straightened out. I mean, This is a Star Trek show. They got to get it right on Star Trek. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Well, we also got an email from John, who is one of our ReBinge Deep Space Nine listeners. And he says, bittersweet, great episode, great series. Now we have to wait. No more double podcast weekends. That's true. We're back to one podcast per weekend after this. Kittycation going Black Panther on Dreadnought was nice. I didn't think of Black Panther.
Oh, right.
That's probably a better reference. But it was the slashes across the screen that made me think of Wolverine. But okay, John, good reference. He continues by saying, the diviner looked like a Jem'Hadar spilling something on the deck of the bridge.
Yeah.
And then really looked like Gollum as the soul unwanted at the end. That is very true. And he says, can't wait for more.
Yeah, he'd lost his precious.
Maybe that's what he was looking for when he was digging around on the ground. He was looking for his precious. Was he drawing pictures of the protostar? My precious.
It looked like he was making markings on the ground, I thought.
Interesting.
Well, that wraps up the feedback, so let's move into the Star Trekkiness of this episode.
Another great Star Trek speech coming from Janeway at the end, including when she says new life and new civilizations.
I loved that.
This whole episode was very Star Trek-y.
Yeah.
Once they put the uniforms on, it all started feeling like Star Trek to me.
Right. Okay, the next thing I have is the hope for the future.
Yep.
That these kids have potential and that Gwendala is more than just her genetics and her background.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
And how she says, you can't trade one tragedy for another. It felt very much a Star Trek theme.
Yeah, very much a Star Trek theme. I definitely agree with that. And the part about Gwendala being more than just her genetics, that's definitely a theme that we cover many times. If we look at Worf, that's a good example of this similar sort of story.
He can embrace being a Klingon without embracing the more negative aspects of their society.
Yeah, and he is a part of Starfleet, and he believes and protects those ideals.
Yeah.
At least up to the point that I'm at on Deep Space Nine. I don't know what happens after season 4. We also had when we were evacuating the asteroid and we saved everybody. We saved all the miners, all the unwanted. You got to save everyone.
Yes.
That's definitely the Star Trek way.
Absolutely.
And they gave them a Starfleet badge at the end, and you see that sort of overhead shot of all of them on the Rev 12 with the Cation holding the badge, to help with the translating.
Yeah.
And also it gives them an opportunity to call the protostar if they needed to. I don't know what the range is of that badge.
Yeah.
A little Star Trekkiness going on there.
Guys, how do we stop this thing?
Yeah. By the way, exactly. That was the next thing I was going to say. They're now on this ship from the future, I assume. And it's a bunch of miners and many of them kids. Do they really know what to do with this ship? How dangerous is this?
That's a good question. I assumed, as obviously you did, that the ship was from the future as well.
Yeah.
So maybe the ship isn't from the future. Maybe it's something he put together or stole or obtained.
Could be.
So it's current technology. It's not that advanced.
So maybe that's why all those miners knew what it was.
Yeah. It'd be cooler if it was from the future, but that really would be a bit like Star Trek, the first Kelvin movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Next Trekkie thing, giving the villain a chance to surrender peacefully.
Trying to talk the villain out of his agenda.
Yes.
That was never going to happen.
Yeah, and coming from Dal as well. Another nice touch for that advancement of Dal as not just a character, but also as a Starfleet cadet.
Also, this theme where Janeway makes this speech about how they've figured out that they're stronger together. One of my absolute favorite things about Star Trek is the theory of the team and how the team is so much stronger together and how they look out for each other and they'll lay down their lives for each other. And man, did you get that in this episode?
Well, that's a Roddenberry theme, the concept of the group of dissimilar individuals working together for a common goal.
Yeah, love it.
And my final Star Trekkiness point is this is another episode of the series that felt more like a Star Trek movie than a TV show.
Yeah. Well, this is something I say about Discovery. I think Discovery is so much more like Star Trek movies than it is like the older Star Trek TV shows, because it has to be. The world doesn't do episodic TV in the same way that we used to back then.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to try to do that with the new Strange New Worlds that's coming out, and I guess we'll see how that works.
Just fascinated to see how that works.
They can't be as completely self-contained in their 46 minutes as they were back then, because then it was all about syndication and reruns and money.
Right.
It was all about money, just like everything always is. And it's so different as we interchange here between this show and Deep Space Nine, which is still the old school Trek.
Right.
But you know what? I love it all. I'm fine with the episodic stuff. We laugh at it and we complain about it when it doesn't make sense. Like when something horrible happens to a character and then next week they're completely fine and we just start over. That's the way that it was then. This is the way that it is now. And I'm okay with both of them. I'm able to watch it.
Yeah. And I am so fascinated to see what the modern episodic show is going to be like and how that's going to translate.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, that's enough of the Star Trekkiness. I think, as we said, a whole thing Star Trekky.
Completely.
Yep. Let's move on to ratings then. What is your rating? Or would you like me to give your rating?
I am going to defer to you on this one.
I'm pretty sure your rating is 10.
Absolutely. Great episode. Hit every high point once again. Music, story, animation, ships, Trekkiness, just thoroughly enjoyable.
I agree. I absolutely loved it. I'll give it a 10 as well.
Whoa.
I think the first episode of this two-parter was really good, really entertaining, but they needed to stick the landing, as Brian from Colorado said last week.
Yeah.
And they did. They really did stick the landing. The amount of stuff that they crammed into this short episode is incredible.
Crazy.
Especially since they had that whole part in the middle of exposition. It never felt flat. It didn't feel rushed. It was great. Yeah, I really loved it.
The directing and the editing for this episode must have been a ridiculous amount of work just to get it to work so well.
Yep, totally agree. Well, I can't wait for more. So I guess we will be back when season 1B or part 2 of season 1 returns. And I think it's going to be after a lot of other Star Trek because Discovery is coming back next week. And then after that, we have Picard. And then after that, we have Strange New Worlds. And then after that, we have Lower Decks. And then I imagine Prodigy will reappear after that. So there's a lot of Star Trek between then and now, but I'm really looking forward to it.
So do you think we'll be Star Trek'd out by that point?
You know, it's possible. I do get saturated with stuff. I think what helps is that each of these shows is so different.
Yeah.
That you just kind of go to the next thing and it's fine. Yeah, I hope we don't OD like too much Marvel, but I guess we'll see.
It seems pretty unlikely from us too.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, I want to let you know that James and I can always be reached on ReBingeIt@gmail.com and also on Twitter and Instagram @ReBingeIt.
And don't forget, you can also listen to our Deep Space Nine podcast called ReBinge Deep Space Nine, available everywhere you get your podcasts, and also available on YouTube on the RebingeIt channel.
And the Prodigy podcast is available on the Talk Through Media YouTube channel. Since Prodigy is going on hiatus for a while, but next week with Star Trek Discovery returning, Brian and Ruthie's podcast will be coming back. So they're planning to record the episode a little bit earlier than normal next week. So the deadline for Discovery Season 4, Episode 8, title Still Unknown, is Thursday, February 10th. He says 2021 in his notes, but it's 2022, Brian.
Pretty sure it is.
But the deadline will be at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, subject to change. So to submit your theories and feedback to them for that podcast, you go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, and you can submit text or audio, or you can call 216-232-6146 and leave a voicemail, or you can email them at StarTrekDiscovery@talkthroughmedia.com. And of course, just like with Prodigy, you can post in the designated episode thread on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. So there's lots of ways to get involved with both of our podcasts.
And I have to give a shout out to a friend's podcast, Teebs and Kid Phoenix Versus. Teebs is a regular guest on each season of our Deep Space Nine podcast, and the Teebs and Kid Phoenix podcast analyzes popular culture, movies, and TV. And the first episode of the new season takes on 80s action movies. Thoroughly good listen if you enjoy geeky culture.
Well, that's it for this week. Come back next week to hear Star Trek Discovery, but rejoin the ReBingeIt crew when Star Trek Prodigy returns later this year.
Thanks for joining us on the Star Trek Prodigy ReBingeIt podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me. For now.
Lies and hypocrisy.